or Joan of Arc or Martin Luther King, the Wright brothers, to have a vision, an idea, a dream, and to begin to no longer keep doing the same things, as Greg said, because all of the adversity in our life is to initiate us into greatness. It's to call out something greater in us. And so these people retreated from their life for 4 days, and they took away the constant stimulation that reminded them of who they were long enough to change their brain and body to be ahead of their environment. And so we measured some amazing things in these people. We saw people with chronic diseases all of a sudden have normal bodies again. We've had people in our work that were diagnosed with rare genetic disorders. My thinking was, if I knew the things from the people that had spontaneous remissions that I studied, what those commonalities were, we should be able to reproduce them, right? So that's why we developed the model of transformation in our workshops. I just did what people already knew how to do and just used the science to explain it. But we had to get people to reproduce it, because anything that's repeatable is a scientific law, or verges on a scientific law. So I wanted to see if we kept doing it, if we were able to produce some type of consistent change. And we started to see some pretty amazing things take place. We did a second event in July of this year, and we partnered with Heart Math Institute, and people wore the monitors for 24 hours, and we were measuring heart coherence with brain coherence. And I'll show you some pictures of some amazing people that sustained heart coherence for hours. It became a skill. As Greg said, once you know how to do it, you know how to do it. So when we live by the hormones of stress and all of the energy goes to these hormonal centers and away from the heart, of course the heart is going to be the first organ that's starved of energy. And when we live by the hormones of stress, we will always try to force the outcome. We'll always try to push and make it happen, because we are matter trying to change matter. And one of the things I learned in studying people that did amazing things in these workshops is I watched a lady for a whole hour. I watched her brain on the scan, and her brain was working so hard. And as I watched it over and over again, watched it over and over again, watched it over and over again, the more she tried to change, the worse her brain got. And I went up to her afterwards and I said, how was that for you? And she said, I had the worst meditation of my life. And something clicked in me in that moment, and I knew that most of us, we try to use our brain to change our brain. We try to use the ego to change the ego. We try to use the program to change the program, and it only endorses it. And in that moment, something clicked, and I knew that they had to become pure consciousness, that they had to get beyond their body, get beyond their environment, and get beyond time. Because when you become pure consciousness, and we have all the biological and neurological machinery to do this, by the way, you come preloaded with everything you need. You don't need anything else. That when you forget about yourself, when you become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, no time, and you become pure consciousness, a thought impossibility. The moment you are consciousness, now you have dominion over your body. Now you can change something in your environment, and now you can create some future time. And the moment we saw people become pure consciousness, and we will talk about that after the break, the brain naturally gets organized. The hormones of stress, when we are under the gun of the fight or flight nervous system, the brain and the heart move out of rhythm. It's like a group of people playing the drums all at the same time with no rhythm. It's noise. And that's what happens to the neural network in the heart and the neural networks in the brain. And they actually, if you saw the brain on a functional scan, it begins to compartmentalize. Different compartments of the brain are no longer communicating with each other because different communities are saying, hey, it's not a time to communicate now. There's a tiger on our back here. We got to run. And so the long-term effects of stress causes the brain to move into what's called high beta brainwave patterns, like driving your sports car in first gear. And different compartments of the brain no longer communicate with each other. And if you were to measure that on a brain scan, it's very erratic patterns. The moment you become pure consciousness, you forget about yourself. That's my definition of creation. The moment that happens, the brain goes, thank God he's out of the way. Now I can get organized again. The operator is finally gone for a few minutes. And we started in that event, in that February event, teaching people how to become pure consciousness. And when that happened, we saw their hearts get highly coherent. We saw their brains get highly coherent. And it's kind of an irony. If you want to change something about your body, you got to forget about your body. You want to change something, problem in your life, you got to forget about your life. You want to create some future time, you have to forget about time. And you have to become no face, no gender, no profession. You have to become pure consciousness. And we saw it over and over again, that 91% of our people that had their brains scanned in our first event had a more than 80% change in their brain for the better. And there was no drugs, there was no, therapies. They just went through the process of observing their thoughts and becoming conscious of their unconscious thoughts because they're no longer being distracted by their environment. Pay attention to their behaviors and their actions and look at the body as the mind and the emotions and master that. In the first day, the energy in the room, we measured it. Guess what happened to it? It went down. Because people who are breaking all their emotional ties to their known familiar life. But when we went to that next day and they became pure consciousness, the energy in the room began to rise. And when we saw that, it was miraculous. And we measured the energy as it began to continuously improve. And when we did our event in July, we started seeing people having enormous amounts of energy that were stored in their body travel up through their heart and into their brain. And we captured people with a full-on Kundalini experience, full-on ecstasy in their brain. And they were common people just like you. And boy, I tell you what, after that experience, they could care less about their checking account. They could care less about their problems. And we saw one lady move into such a state of ecstasy. We were watching her on the camera, on the screen like this. And all of a sudden, we saw her brain get very organized. The front of the brain talking to the back of the brain, the back with the front, side to side. Strong level of coherence. And all of a sudden, she went into this high consciousness state called gamma brainwaves. And gamma brainwaves is super consciousness. And I looked at that screen, and I looked at the neuroscientist, and I looked at him again, and I said, I think she's in ecstasy. And we turned around, and she had tears running down her face. She was so connected to something greater. She didn't want the experience to end. I'm going to show you pictures of her brain. She wanted the moment to elongate. She felt so connected, and all of a sudden, when that posterior pituitary turned on and released all that oxytocin into her brain, guess what it did to the amygdala where all the stress circuits are? It anesthetized, it shut down fear, it shut down hostility, it shut down sadness. Those circuits are turned off when oxytocin is like that. And the heart begins to open its vascular channels and motility increases, and she feels connected to something greater. And she would never try to force the outcome in that moment. She's already connected to the outcome. She's trusting in the outcome. And we saw it with more than one person. And so the concept of information to transformation is to empower you that it's possible, that all of this information and science and everything that's coming out right now is for us to do something with. And this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. It's a time in history to know how. And when you give common people the opportunity to understand the truth about themselves, and then you inspire them to go out and try it, to try it like a scientist. Hey, I'm going to change the way I think and feel. I should see some effect in my life. And the moment I can correlate the feedback in my life with what I did, I'm going to do it again. And so we've had people around the world heal themselves of all kinds of conditions. We've had people win the lottery. We've had people create new opportunities for themselves, because nobody is so special to be excluded from this phenomenon. And the phenomenon is that you are a creator. And when you live by the hormones of stress, you forget that, and so do I. And when we live by the hormones of stress, we are always trying to change matter by being matter. We're being a brain trying to change a brain. We're being matter trying to change something in our life. But when people begin to understand how to apply these principles and they begin to practice them and make them a skill, and the more you practice it, the better you get at it. So think about this. What if you woke up in the morning and instead of getting out of bed and doing the same thing as you did the day before and going through the same routine as you did for the last 5 years, what if you woke up in the morning and you said, you place your hand over your heart and you say, I'm going to teach you what it feels like to be noble today. I'm going to train you to know what abundance is. And you begin to marry a clear intention with an elevated emotion, and you memorize that feeling, and you're able to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day. Get ready, because something unusual is going to happen in your life. That's the law. And the hardest part about all of this, hardest part, is simply making the time to do it. Making time for our precious selves to decide then, well, geez, I want to be wealthy and abundant. Well, if I want to be wealthy and abundant, then I can't feel lack, because a wealthy person never feels lack. And if I feel lack, I'm going to attract lack. Gold only attracts gold.